Hello, my name is Dinithi, and today I'll be speaking about the associations between adverse childhood experiences and their impact on later life cognitive and behavioral impairment. When it comes to dementia, the research field and the general population often think about later life in terms of risk factors and prevention. In fact, only one of the 12 modifiable risk factors of dementia established by the Lancet Commission focus on early life. However, early life is a period of growth and development, so it's not surprising that experiences in childhood can have long-lasting impacts on the brain. Now, adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, include physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, neglect, as well as household dysfunction occurring before the age of 18. As a result of ACEs, studies have found long-term alterations in the brain circuitry and structure, such as reduced volumes in the hippocampus, cerebellum, corpus callosum, and reductions in the global brain volume. These overall reductions in brain volume may potentially lead to decreased brain reserve. Now, simply put, brain reserve is the brain's physical capacity to function despite deterioration from disease. So, someone with lower brain reserve due to reductions in brain volume may be less resilient to deterioration from dementia and will show more behavioral and cognitive impairment as the disease onsets. The first outcome measure is everyday cognition, or ECOG, which measures later life emergent cognitive decline as it relates to daily function. I looked at 4 domains of cognition, including memory, language, visual, spatial, and perceptual abilities, and executive functioning. The second outcome variable was mild behavioral impairment, or MBI, which is aimed at capturing later life emergent and persistent behavioral and/or personality changes in older adults. I looked at 5 domains of MBI, including decreased motivation, impulse discontrol, emotional dysregulation, social inappropriateness, and abnormal perceptions. Both of these markers are associated with an increased risk for dementia. Therefore, the study aimed to determine the relationship between adverse childhood experiences and everyday cognition, as well as the association between ACEs and mild behavioral impairment. I looked at cognitively healthy pre-dementia samples to see if the negative consequences of ACEs on dementia risk can be observed in mid to late life, potentially allowing for earlier detection of diseases like Alzheimer's disease. I hypothesized that individuals with greater severity of ACEs will experience greater cognitive and behavioral impairment, indicating greater susceptibility to dementia. To investigate this, I used cross-sectional data from the CanProtect study looking at 786 participants. It should be noted that this was not a patient population, allowing these results to be more generalizable to the general public. ACEs were measured using the Childhood Trauma Screener 5-question questionnaire. Cognition was measured by the revised Everyday Cognition 2 scale, and behavioral impairment was measured by the Mild Behavioral Impairment Checklist. Based on the distribution of our data, I used a multivariable negative binomial regression to determine the association between ACEs and ECOG, and a zero-inflated negative binomial regression to determine the association between ACEs and MBI. Both of these models were adjusted for our covariates, which include age, sex, education, cognitive diagnosis, ethnic origin, as well as clinical diagnosis of depression and/or anxiety. Because those with ACEs can develop depression or anxiety, which are also risk factors for dementia, I ran a mediation analysis to ensure that the associations we saw were not mediated by depression and/or anxiety. After adjusting for our covariates, we see that every 1-point increase in the childhood trauma score indicated a 2.8% greater ECOG score, indicating worse cognition, and a 7.3% greater MBI score, indicating greater behavioral impairment. We can see how this maps onto nearly an exponential increase in ECOG and MBI as ACEs get more severe. For the mediation analysis, we see that the association between ACEs and ECOG and the association between ACEs and MBI mediated by depression or anxiety were non-significant. In contrast, the direct effect of ACEs on ECOG and MBI were significant. Therefore, the study illustrated that older adults with more severe ACEs have poorer cognition and more severe behavioral impairment. Because this association is not mediated by previous psychiatric history, ACEs may directly contribute to more behavioral and worse cognitive symptoms, indicating the importance of early life risk factors. We have identified a specific group that's at risk for dementia to allow for earlier treatment and interventions. Because it's not feasible to screen all those with ACEs, instead, clinicians can be informed by the presence of ACEs to further screen for cognition and MBI to determine dementia risk and provide earlier treatment and intervention. With that, I would like to thank my supervisor, Dr. Ismail, and all the lab members for their guidance and mentorship throughout this project. I would also like to thank the Gordie Howe Cares Fund for supporting the CanProtect study, which provided the data for this study. Thank you so much.